My name is Laura Alarcon. I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Security Investigative Services. Please be advised that this meeting is going to be conducted in accordance with the agenda as it's been noticed. However, by approval of the committee, any item may be taken out of order if necessary. Additionally, the meeting is being webcast on the internet, and the webcast can be accessed via the BSIS homepage at bsis.ca.gov. However, please note that there may be circumstances beyond the committee's control that the parts of the webcast may be preempted due to another presentation that's being provided. Highly unlikely, but still just a disclaimer to let you know. So I'd like to move on now to agenda item 2, which is to call the roll and to establish the committee quorum.
Cruz.
Full name.
Oh, sorry. Simon Cruz. Marcel Egley. Here. Anton Farby. Frank Huntington.
Present.
Todd Inglis.
Present.
Matthew Lujan.
Here.
Lynn Moorfield.
Here.
Nancy Murish.
Here.
Eli Owen.
Here.
Stanton Perez.
Here.
Roy Ron.
Here.
Tim Westfall. 10 present.
So we have a quorum, and I'd like to note for the record, the official start time of the meeting is 10:08. Normally, oh, it is right behind me. Okay, so normally this time we'd stand up to do the Pledge of Allegiance, so I encourage all of you to stand up. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just a couple of housekeeping items. There are several handouts in today's meeting, and those handouts are available at the entrance of the door. Since we are in a different building, is everybody familiar with the restrooms are, or do we need to go over that? Nope, okay. So then let's go on to item 3, which is review and approval of the minutes from the January 11th, 2018 meeting. Oh, and let me ask this as well. If somebody makes a motion, if you could, after the motion, state your name, because apparently we're having some difficulties when we're doing the minutes to see who actually made the motion, you know, the first and the second. So if you make the motion immediately after, just state your name. So do I have a motion for the minutes?
Second.
Thank you. So I do have a motion for the minutes. Do I have any questions or comments from the committee regarding the meeting minutes themselves? Do I have any comments from the public regarding the meeting minutes? So the motion before the committee is to adopt the minutes for the January 12, 2017 meeting. Please call the roll.
Marcel Egley.
Here.
Sorry. Simon Cruz. Yes or no?
He's not here.
No, sorry. Marcel Egley.
Oh, you're taking the vote.
Yes.
I apologize. Yes.
Marcel Egley. Anton Farby.
Yeah.
Frank Huntington.
Aye.
Todd Inglis.
Yes.
Matthew Lujan. Lynn Moorfield.
Aye.
Nancy Murish.
Aye.
Eli Owen.
Aye.
Stanton Perez.
Aye.
Roy Ron.
Aye.
Tim Westfall. 10 ayes.
The motion passes on a vote of 10-0. So we're moving right along to item 4, which is the Bureau Chief's welcome remarks and news and updates. And the first item under this agenda item is licensing update. So from July 1st, 2017 to February 28, 2018, BSIS has received a total of 47,683 initial applications for licensure and over 62,750 applications for renewal. This equates to an average of about 5,960 applications each month, initial applications each month, and about 7,800 renewal applications each month. In comparison with data reported in January, this reflects an overall 2% increase in the monthly rate of initial applications coming in the door. So this is additional workload. It's also reflective of a growth that we're seeing in the industry of having these applications coming in. In regards to renewals, we have not seen any change. That has remained consistent, which by virtue of the fact that we're seeing a growing number of initial applications coming in and renewals staying flat is indicative of the overall licensing population continuing to grow slightly. Regarding security guard applications, 83% of the initial and 55% of the renewals were submitted on Brees. And this rate aligns with last year's fiscal data and is aligning with the prior online licensing system, online professional licensing system. So it believes that I believe now that this is going to be basically the normalization of the Brees participation rate for security guards, which is about 83% of initial and about half on renewals. During the January's meeting, I reported that the alarm agent participation in Brees from July 1, 2017 through the end of the calendar year had reflected an participation rate increase of 120% for initial and 25% for renewal. Based on the new data, including the 2 additional months for this year of January through February, the Brees participation rate for alarm agents also appears to have normalized at about 65% for initial and 52% for renewals. So we're at a really good place with Brees apps. In regards to Brees participation rates for other license types, they have been remaining essentially unchanged since soon after the launch. Locksmith employees, we see about 60% initial and 30% renewal. Proprietary officers, about 50% are coming in both initial and renewal. On the repossession agent employee, they're not eligible for Brees on initial application, but the renewal participation rate is less than 40%. So again, trying to figure out how we might be able to get that one up a little bit more because renewing in Brees is renewing in real time. As far as company apps, private patrol operators, we're seeing about 20% of the initial apps coming in on Brees and about a third of them on renewals. The alarm companies, less than 20% are coming in on initial and about 30% are coming in on renewal. That's about comparable with the locksmith applications as well. Private investigators, company licenses, we would like to see more participation rate because you guys are at 17% initial and 25% at renewal. And like to start working a little bit more with your licensee population, similar to what we did with the alarm industry, to see if we can get some of that participation rate up. The benefits for a company aren't as significant as they are for registrants, but still, by coming in through the Brees platform on a company application, you're completely bypassing the cashiering office, which can take 2 to 3 weeks off of processing times. As far as firearm training facilities, we're looking at about a third of them initial and renewal. Batons, where we would really like to work a little bit more with initial applications coming in baton training facilities because for this fiscal year we've had none. And about 44%, however, are renewing on Brees. Alarm qualified managers, about 40% for both initial and renewal. Repossession qualified managers, we're just 10% coming in the door, about half in renewal. So trying to see what we can do to increase their participation coming in the door. Because it's similar to a company, you're not necessarily having the full breadth of benefits that come for registrants, which if the way a registrant application works is if all the information that was entered by the applicant completely synchronizes with the information that the live scan operator entered, Brees system is designed to automatically sync and issue the license, provided the information aligns and there's no criminal conviction information. So for qualified managers, it's similar to companies that what the true benefit is taking off about 2 to 3 weeks of processing time from the cashiering office.
What they thought is that exactly what we discussed last time, that it was an initial license and they didn't realize they could do it on Brees.
Okay.
Can you use the mic?
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, so it is what we had thought last time. The solution, and we have put that out to our membership, is they thought that it was the same as an initial license, their QM.
Okay.
So when you originally, you and I both had agreed on that we thought that was the reason.
And it is valid. Okay.
Exactly.
So we'll try to get a
We've
little bit more
encouraged
robust
them.
information out there that
Yes.
they are available. It's only the employees that are not available on Brees. And so everyone was believing non-company in its entirety. Got it.
Correct.
Okay, so hopefully then if we're getting the word out by the next round of a meeting, we'll see some increase in that participation rate.
Yeah.
In regard to the instructors, firearm instructors, About 30% are using the initial, almost half are renewing on Brees. Baton instructors, 40% for both initial and renewal. In regards to firearm applications, if you recall, we pulled them off of Brees last summer because of the high deficiency rates that were associated with individuals uploading the application, which was part of the requirement for the application process due to the attestation that's required from the instructor. So we are purely in a paper environment right now, and what we're seeing is, and we can talk a little bit, interested to hear from the committee, but talk a little bit about a trend that has been historically downward in the number of initial applications coming in for firearm permits is reversed. In this short year, based on a straight line projection on the number of applications we've received from July 1 through the end of February, we're looking at about an 8% increase in firearm permit applications this fiscal year. So on monthly, since that equates to about 1,000 applications coming in a month. I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. Since July 1 of this fiscal year, we have seen about 1,000 applications coming in monthly. Based on a straight line projection, we're anticipating just shy of 13,000 firearm permit applications coming in the door this fiscal year, which is reflective of an 8% overall increase in the number of firearm permit applications. In comparison, we were about 11,780 firearm permits last year, and this year we're almost getting close up to 13,000. So again, we're seeing an uptick in that. As part of our efforts to enhance the operational efficiencies overall, which was the commitment that the Bureau made last year when we were negotiating the fee increase bill, based on the audit results that did confirm and validate the fact that fees needed to be increased. It had been through inflation, a long period of time since the fees had been touched previously. But also the audit brought to light that the Bureau has some work to do to become more efficient and effective. And so I want to share some of the things that we're doing along that lines and kind of the commitment that we've made. So to facilitate the transition to the new fees, Bureau staff have been revising applications overall to enhance their usability and provide more important information in the application document itself about not only the application process, but the responsibilities that come with holding that license and certain things that are required in the law, reporting requirements for licensee to provide to the Bureau. We've also been working on new forms that will be facilitating certain business processes. And I'm going to talk a little bit, I'll give you an example of such that in a minute. But in regards to updating the firearm application, many of you know that we've completely revamped both the initial and renewal apps. And one of the things that we significantly did to try to help individuals ensure that they're meeting the requirements that are required by regulation to renew it is we've actually put a qualification, a range qualification schedule that if somebody aligns with this schedule would reasonably meet the requirements for renewal. And the schedule goes by month depending on the expiration month of the permit. We also sent a reminder to all firearm instructors on the correct score. The application also provides a reminder to all instructors on the correct scoring of the written exam because we were seeing a lot of variations of the way the exam was being scored, primarily due to the diagram that as it relates to the actual handguns themselves. And Sam will be talking a little bit later about some of the changes that we've made to the manual response to that. But at least at this point, to help address the deficiencies that we were seeing with incorrect exam passage scores and having to return the application to the applicant, who in turn had to return it to the firearm instructor to have a new one created, we've provided more transparency in what's required. We also revised all the renewal applications for every license type in the Bureau to facilitate the transition to the new Brees. And so the application as it exists now has 2 fees that are associated with it, with the exception of private investigator or license apps, because you were not subject to the fee change that happened last year. Only those license fees that supported the Private Security Services Fund were. And so each application form now will specifically explain to the individual as they're completing the renewal form to look at the expiration of their current license registration permit certificate, and that is what's driving what's the renewal. And that even goes into the fact that if somebody's expiring on after July 1 of 2018, which is when the new fees go into effect, and they opt to pay in May, they're not paying the current fee amount. They're subject to the new fee amount. We also added more robust information about what the fees that are involved for delinquent company licenses and training facilities, which the law authorizes them to be able to come back in with a renewal or a reinstatement up to 3 years after expiration. And because we're lapsing multiple renewal cycles, we've had very high deficiency rates when somebody tries to come back in and pay what they believe is the appropriate renewal fee when it is incorrect. So the new renewal applications actually step the applicant through on, if you've lapsed a renewal cycle or now coming back into the door, this is what it's going to entail. Also, because after they've lapsed for one whole renewal cycle or 2 renewal cycles, it becomes very complex, and we've established a specific email account that's called Expired Licenses, and it's dedicated specifically for company applications that are seeking to renew. Is that incorrect? Expired renewals. And we'll be putting email blasts out about it as well. And it basically, if you're unsure of the exact fee that you owe if you're coming in with a delinquent company renewal, we're trying to turn it around in 2 to 3 days with a response of the exact fee amount. So then that means the applicant for renewal coming in the door will be paying a correct fee amount, which reduces workload overall by having to have it returned to the applicant and go through correspondence from the Bureau, correspondence from the cashiering unit. We've also developed a form to assist firearm permit holders to associate their permit to other qualifying license that they hold outside of doing that process during the renewal cycle. And as a reminder, when the legislation was enacted to require every security guard who is seeking to obtain an initial firearms permit to have to complete an assessment to demonstrate appropriate judgment, restraint, and self-control for the purposes of carrying a firearm, the Bureau had to look at all its business processes to determine if there were any opportunities to circumvent the requirement. And one of the things that was observed was that the prior business process was just to issue the firearm permit and maybe have one license associated with it, even though the individual may hold other qualifying licenses. And so in order to not allow somebody to hold a firearm permit associated, let's say, with a private investigator or an alarm agent, but then turn around and provide armed security guard services, it was determined that the actual firearm permit needed to list every qualifying license that was officially associated with the permit. So, in order to facilitate the process for those individuals who have been functioning in an environment where they've just had one qualifying license to date and using that in all the capacities for which they hold the license, we developed this form to enable people prior to going through the renewal to be able to request to the Bureau that they want to associate an additional qualifying license. There is no fee associated with the Bureau updating the associations that are associated. I said association 3 times. Try to figure out. There's no fee for the Bureau to do the Brees changes that is required to associate the additional qualifying license. However, there is a fee to provide a new permit, because after we've established the new associations, obviously the permit holder wants the permit to reflect that fact. And so what we've done is we've actually combined the form to be request to associate additional license and request a replacement permit. And so the current fee by law to have that replacement permit is $10, but on July 1, that will go up to $25. And that is everybody. That's not just PIs are still affected by that because of the cross-reference to the firearm permit to the Private Security Services Act. And so, anyway, it's just an easier way for folks to be able to make that request to associate the additional licenses.
Chief, where's the form located?
It's not, I was going to just tell you there right now. We've just worked on it, and it should be up within the next 2 weeks. That's part of my update, just kind of saying what's up there now and what's not. No, that's fine. So, the other thing that we've done is due to deficiencies that have been associated with the current replacement license application, because the way it exists now is one form for basically every license within the Bureau, and because of the high deficiency rates, we have separated out all applications unique to the license type. And right now, the renewal apps, the new renewal apps are up on the Bureau's website now. In regards to the replacement apps, as well as the Firearm Association form And the new email account expired renewals, we anticipate to have those completed by sometime next week or the following. So very shortly, those will be up. And when those come up, we will be doing the email blast to let you know. Also in anticipation of the fee increases, Brees, the Bureau staff has been working with cashiering staff to talk about the fee increases, to talk about examples of things that they may see coming in the door, particularly with renewals that are coming after expiration but still within the delinquent renewal cycle. Staff have updated tables to facilitate cashiering staff to be able to have a quick one-point reference on whether the license is expiring before or after July 1 and what the new delinquency amount would be associated with a current fee or an after July 1 fee. We also worked with them to revise all of their letters that are associated when insufficient fees come to the door and they return it to the applicant. In the past, it just basically, the letter said you have paid insufficient, but it didn't really make clearly everything that was needed. The new forms, again, will have on the new letters on the reverse side will provide very explicit instructions to the individual on what exactly is owed, in addition to the way that you break downs of, are you renewing before July 1? Do you have a before July 1 expiration or an after July 1 expiration? Okay, do we have any questions regarding the licensing update before I move on to enforcement? Did that answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Sure.
Regarding the firearm applicants, considering that there's been an increase overall, is there any consideration to maybe have them to go back to the web-based sort of applications? We're going to continue with the hard copies for paperwork.
We're the licensing chief's probably going, no.
Yeah.
At this, yeah, you asked the last thing last time. I would say we tried it for almost 18 months to try to see. The deficiency rate had to do with the applicant uploading the actual application form and submitting it. And we had over 50% that just by paying felt that they were renewing. And when you have that load of deficiencies, when we have to generate letters, contact that workload on top of the workload we're seeing, we just don't have the staff bandwidth. I think it would have to be significantly down the road if the Bureau was maybe in a good place with processing, that we wouldn't add another layer to things that could potentially create additional backlogs. Certainly in the environment that we're working in right now, I don't see anything within the next 12 months because I continue to anticipate issues with renewal fees, which is going to automatically kind of increase the deficiency rates overall. Yes, and so, I think overall, the whole process of the firearm permit is very unique from any other application, because on any other renewal application, for the most part, it's paying the renewal fee and the applicant just signing, attesting it for guard if they've completed certain training, or just attesting that they're the individual that's signing the application. With the firearm permit, because it's two parts, it's one part where the applicant's, that part of the form, but the second part is the instructor. And so that dynamic of having to have that separate certification makes it incumbent that the whole application form needs to be put into Brees separately. It cannot be anything electronic. You can't attest, have at least not without changes in law. Having the attestation in writing requires it all to be paper-driven inherently. And then the fact of was trying to facilitate it, that paper-driven coming in a Brees environment just wasn't working. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, so on to enforcement. So from July 1, 2017 to February 28, 2018, the Bureau has initiated 124 compliance inspections and carried out 53. Of the 53 that were carried out, 43% were private patrol operators, 23% were the firearm training facilities, all of which encompass those that became newly licensed as required by the new law that we have to go out and touch every firearm training facility within 120 days of licensure. So the Bureau is meeting that mandate. In addition, we had 15% alarm company operators, 13% repossession agencies, and 5% baton training facilities. During that same 8-month window of time, we opened 330 investigations, closed 400 investigations, 16 of which were conducted by the Bureau's Law Enforcement Division investigation. Regarding our complaint resolution cases, we've closed about 200 cases during that time frame. In regard to disciplinary actions from the 8-month period, 50 citations were issued, 22 licenses were revoked, and 25 accusations were filed with the Attorney General's office to take formal disciplinary action against the licensee. Any questions on enforcement? So we'll go on to legislation. So these are we're starting a new legislative, well, it's not second year of the legislative term session, but it's a new year, so we're starting with a new round of bills being introduced. So kind of talking about the bills that the Bureau has identified that touches either the industries regulated by the Bureau or potentially the Bureau itself. So AB 1247 is actually a 2-year bill. It was introduced last year. It's currently sitting in the Senate. And the bill in its current version will amend the vehicle code. So it doesn't touch the B&P code, but it's here because it deals with the changes in the vehicle code impact the activity of repossession. And so it relates to the release of impounded vehicles to repossession agencies and their agents. So the bill is currently in Senate Business and Professions Committee, and it has no hearing date set as of today. The other bill is AB 2067, and as this bill was introduced, it required every school district to have in place an armed security guard or school resources officer at each school when children are present. However, the security guard provision was amended out of the bill on April 3rd. The bill did pass out of Assembly Education Committee on unanimous vote on March 21st and was heard in Assembly Appropriations Committee yesterday, where it was put on the suspense file. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that terminology, the suspense file is something that is used by the legislature's fiscal appropriation committees to determine whether if a bill has a significant fiscal impact and they need to look at it overall in relationship to what's happening in general fund funding or just if it's a significant threshold. And I believe I know it's $150,000 for the Senate. I think don't know? Okay. It's about $150,000 for the Senate. I think it may be around that for the Assembly as well. But this bill, so it's been held, and generally what happens is these bills are taken up probably the end of May, where they look at the whole bills in entirety and the whole fiscal impact of the whole bills. The Bureau is going to continue to monitor this bill, however, just in case, because as we all know through the legislative process, things come and go, and we want to make sure that it doesn't, if it does touch something again with the Bureau, that we're engaged if we have to present any potential amendments because of an impact or maybe clarification, technical change to align with the Practice Act requirements. The other bill I want to talk about is AB 2603. And this bill makes some changes to the Private Security Services Act. And in its current form, this is outdated, it just got amended. In its current form, so most of the provisions that I was going to talk about got struck out of the bill in the amendments yesterday. And it looks like right now it's just doing some technical changes in the provisions of the Act as it relates to the firearm permits. So I'm anticipating additional amendments coming down the pipeline based on these set of changes, but the bill right now is in Assembly Business and Professions Committee and is scheduled to be heard on April 17th. Senate Bill 904 extends the provisions in the Alarm Company Act to provide for an alarm company operator licensee to be held by an LLC. The bill passed out of the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee on April 9th and is scheduled to be heard in Senate Judiciary on April 24th. Senate Bill 1217. Under current law, the activities governing a PI licensee obtaining an initial, renewing a current, or the Bureau's authority to revoke a firearms permit held by a PI licensee is by cross-reference to those provisions in the Private Security Services Act. This bill will amend the PI Act to bring in those provisions. It would basically strike out the cross-references to the Private Security Services Act and bring all the provisions for obtaining a BSIS firearm permit into the Act itself. So in many ways, it's a technical change. It's actually, it kind of makes it easier to keep up with changes that happen, particularly with probably ongoing changes that will be happening with firearm permits as the bureaus go through subsequent legislative sunset reviews. So in any event, it takes out the cross-reference to the Private Security Services Act and puts it in straight into the PI Act. And this bill is scheduled to be heard in Senate B&P and Economic Development Committee on April 23rd. The last bill I want to talk about is SB 1170. And this bill cleans up a technical drafting error that happened last year in SB 559. It truly was a drafting error that was off of all of our radar because of the way the sunset provisions that were put into the Private Investigator Act when the authority to allow a PI licensee to be held by an LLC was first implemented. We had comparable sections of law that would be operative on a certain date or repealed on a certain date. And when we were working on SB 559 last year to extend the sunset, Ledge Council, when it originally drafted the bill, inadvertently left out the provision of the operative date. And it became, the operative date was reflecting as if the PI Act had sunsetted the provision to allow a PI licensee to be held as an LLC. So now we have two sections of law in the Act that conflict each other regarding assignment of a license. And so this is an urgency bill to try to remedy this technical error as soon as possible, and it does nothing more than strike out the certain section of law right now that is in conflict with the continued authority to be held as an LLC and the continued authority to be able to sign to an LLC. That is the last bill I want to talk about before I move on to implementation efforts on things. Does anybody have questions regarding
I had a
legislation?
clarification question for AB 2067. Did you mention that the requirement for the contractor security guard was removed from the bill?
2067.
Yes.
So the security guard provision was removed. The bill in its current form will just require a school resource officer. And per the bill, that school resource officer is cross-referencing Penal Code 830.
Mm-hmm.
So this individual will have peace officer status.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So, talking about implementation efforts of the new firearm permit assessment pursuant to 7583.47 of the Business Profession Code. So the Bureau continues with its efforts to implement the requirements that a BSIS registered security guard applying for an initial BSIS firearms permit must successfully complete an assessment as a condition for the issuance of permit. Specifically, the way the current law is written right now, we have to have this assessment program in place by no later than July 1, 2018. And the applicant seeking a firearm permit on or after July 1, 2018 will be subject to the assessment. So I know you heard this last time. I'm going to have to say it again. Given that the Bureau is currently in negotiations with a potential vendor, we've gone now to one vendor, I am unable to provide specific information on what's on the assessment that was selected or fees or anything along that line that's going to be associated with the assessment. However, I can say that the assessment instrument itself has been identified and that the Bureau is on track to have that assessment program up and running as required by law. I can also say that the potential vendor that we are working with does have in place the infrastructure to administer the assessment in various locations throughout the state, and that currently where we have worked on the cost of the actual assessment to the applicant, the Bureau believes we are now at a place where it is reasonable. All Brees configurations changes relating to the assessment program have been made, tested, and are ready to go. And Bureau staff are working on adding the assessment information onto the BSIS website, updating the initial firearm application form to reference the requirement of the assessment. And we're developing correspondence that will be issued to applicants to notify them when they've satisfied all the other conditions for the firearm permit, and now they need to schedule an appointment to complete the assessment. So all the groundwork to be able to move forward for this on July 1st, the Bureau is on task with getting those in place. Any questions regarding the firearm assessment? So, in regards to the fees, I've talked a little bit about it already with the licensing updates, but we're moving along as planned for the implementation of the new fees relating to the PSS fund that go into effect January 1. All the Brees programming changes have been made and tested to ensure that the Brees applications reflect the correct fee amounts, and everything is ready to go for live on July 1. Renewal coupons this month for licenses expiring in July, after July 1, are now going, this month will be going out in the mail. And those new renewal coupons, as generated by the Brees system, will reflect the correct fee amounts. We've posted information on the Bureau's website under the alert items detailing the new fee amounts and an explanation on when they go into effect. And to reiterate, for initial applications coming in the door, the effective date, how it's affecting an applicant is pretty straightforward. If a Brees application is submitted or a paper application is dropped off on the cashiering office, or the application envelope is postmarked on or after July 1, 2018, the new fee will be required. On renewals, talked about it before, but just to reiterate again, the driving force on whether it's the new fee or the current fee is, does that license, registration, certificate, permit expire after July 1 or before July 1? If it's after July 1, the new fee applies regardless of when that fee is actually paid. And as I shared before, we've updated the paper application forms to reflect the two fee amounts for the transition period. And those are now up on the website. We're working now on initial apps. In all honesty, there's a lot of work we want to do with the initial apps, particularly the company apps, because of the high deficiency rates that are with company apps. I don't know whether we're going to be able to complete that more robust update prior to July 1 on the company applications, initial company applications, but at minimum, we will have correct fee amount information on all those applications as we work through the more robust updating. And we anticipate having the updated initial apps posted to the Bureau's website in June, so before the July 1. In spite of these planning efforts, we are anticipating issues with incorrect fee amounts being paid, and as I shared earlier, working with the cashiering office to identify what those issues could be and updating a lot of this so it doesn't even come in the door, but turning it around immediately with the new insufficient fee payment letters going out to the applicants. Between now and July 1st, we will continue to send out information blasts periodically, reminding folks about the new fees and what's happening with the firearm assessment. So if anybody is not currently on the interested parties list, I encourage you to subscribe. And it's very easy to do. You just go to the Bureau's main website, and under quick links, it asks email subscriptions. You click on that, and then just enter your email address to be able to be added. So the last thing that I want to talk about, which isn't on the agenda item, is I want to share with you that I have shared with the governor's office my intent to retire. So I will be retiring on day after my birthday. So it was a milestone. It has been an honor and pleasure serving as the bureau chief. When I was appointed in May of 2013 appointment, and started here in June of 2013. Didn't envision 5 years, but here I am 5 years later. It's been an honor serving for the administration. It's been an honor serving for the Bureau, but it's time for change. This announcement is going to be triggering next week the governor's office and formal solicitation to replace me. They are trying to, because of everything that the Bureau has on its radar right now, we're discussing means for me to provide assistance to facilitate transitions. So can't share too much beyond that, but just know that things will continue to be moving forward, that it will have the success that we've put forth to date, and I don't anticipate any issues with the transition. And even though I won't be sitting in officially the bureau chief role, I'll be around in some capacity, and hopefully that we all stay in touch and all that there. So September 1st. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now you know I was so nervous here. Okay, so any questions or comments from the committee regarding the Bureau Chief's update? Any comments from the public regarding the Bureau Chief's update?
Hi, Jerry Desmond. I just wanted to acknowledge the Bureau Chief and all she's done for the Bureau with that statement that round of applause occurred, but in the role of many of us who are the associations of those licensees who are regulated by the Bureau, I want to express our appreciation for the forward-thinking leadership, dedication, and commitment you've given to this Bureau. It's outstanding, and thank you very much for myself personally.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay. Move on to item 5. Ah, you did this to me.
He's like, I thought I had my composure until Jerry got up.
Yeah. You got it.
Jerry's always causing problems.
So item 5, discussion of technical updates to the Firearms Training Manual and the Firearms Training Written Exam. There is a handout for committee members in your red packet on this. So during the January meeting, Deputy Chief Stadolsky provided information on the cleanup efforts to the Firearms Manual. The committee brought forth 2 issues that we determined needed additional consideration and formed a subcommittee for this purpose. Sam is here to elaborate on the 2 issues, the outcomes of those efforts, the final determinations that were made, as well as the next steps in getting the word out about the updated manual and the revised exam score sheet.
Good morning, everybody. So in your packet, you should have the handout for agenda item 5. And this is the technical updates to the Firearms Training Manual and Firearms Training Written Examination. So at the January meeting, there were 2 issues that were mentioned that needed further discussion. One of them being, excuse me, the issue of transporting a firearm for licensees and the potential for it to be considered concealed carry. And then the other issue had to deal with the scoring of headshots on targets for qualification. So on the first item, having to do with transporting the firearm, we went and looked at the language that existed in the manual on page 68, and that was a section entitled Carrying the Weapon on Duty. And if you see the edited language in front of you, this is what we had worked on at the Bureau. And one of the things we really wanted to reiterate in this was that the exemption that exists in Penal Code Section 26030 is very specific to exposed carry. And we wanted the guards to understand, based on feedback that we received from this committee, that, you know, if you're wearing a jacket or if you are in any way concealing that firearm, in terms of law enforcement's eyes, it may no longer be exposed. So we had added some language to the paragraph that specifies any clothing worn that covers a firearm could be considered by law enforcement as a weapon being concealed. We added an instructor explanation below that. It says, instructor should explain that the exemption for armed guards in Penal Code Section 26030A10 is specific to exposed firearms and not concealed firearms. Instructors should reiterate to students the need to practice caution when wearing clothing that could lead a peace officer to believe the firearm is concealed. Example given, wearing a jacket or coat that covers a firearm. So that was our first attempt. We had sent that to our subcommittee, and subcommittee agreed with and approved that language for the edits to the manual.
And just for the record, the subcommittee was comprised of Simon Cruz and Todd Inglis, and I do want to thank you for your, well, Todd here today, for the help that you provided us in getting this to a better place.
Do we want to take any questions on that section before we move on to the next one?
Yes, I noticed that a guard may not make any stops while en route has been crossed out.
Correct. And
What's the purpose for that?
the reason we struck that is there's no authority for the Bureau to actually opine on that particular item. The law doesn't say they can't stop on the way home. The exemption specifies while en route to and from work. So, while en route could be for one guard getting in their car and driving straight home. For another guard, it could be getting off work, catching a bus, catching a train. We don't know what those scenarios look like. So having that language in there was a little more than the Bureau's authority.
And this is just from personal experience, seeing a guard like walk into a Starbucks on his way to work in full uniform carrying a weapon. I always thought that was against the rules because that is not his place of work. And that's why I was curious about that.
Right. From the Bureau's perspective, that's not the way the exemption is worded is en route to and from work. So that's our parameters to work with.
So when the Bureau is taking on and putting a requirement that exceeds what the statutory authority provides for, then in essence, we're going into underground regulations.
Gotcha.
So, the interpretation of while in direct route to and from the residence could be perceived that you're not going to be stopping off. If the direct route is point A to B, and all of a sudden this guard is over here at point C, then the statutory provision provides that was not a direct route to and from your home or to the residence range. So even though the specific line that goes into underground regulations has been struck, there is still enough substantive authority overall to be able to, from the Bureau's perspective, deal with a guard who may not be going in direct route to and from, and to be able to ask additional questions. Where's your work? Where's your home? Where's this? And if there's all this circuitous pathway, then you have the ability to say you are not in direct route to and from.
And keep in mind, just to build on that, this is an exemption that exists within the Penal Code for a violation of carrying a firearm in public. It's going to be law enforcement that ultimately decides what that parameter is for the guards. It's not the Bureau's place to decide that.
Any comments from law enforcement on that? Todd, I know since you've worked on that.
No, the reason that we looked at that was because, as you said, if you go to the Penal Code section, it says nothing about direct. It just says en route to employment, to and from the residence. So, or to and from, yeah. So there's no reason putting it in if you can't hold them responsible. If we stop them out there and it's not part of the law, then it puts us law enforcement at a disadvantage rather than take it case by case and should it occur.
Any other questions on that section? The next section had to do with the use of what was called headshots. So the recent changes, I guess a couple years ago now, in the firearms training regulations, one of the things we looked at was the targets that were being used for the purposes of qualifying on the range. The old regulations were specific to a very specific target. That target was not always the easiest target to obtain. We had several reports of a lot of price gouging with different facilities. I mean, applicants would come in and have to pay top dollar just to get this particular target. And when we looked at it, we looked at what some of post standards are. We realized that it didn't have to be that specific target. It could be that silhouette target. There would be certain parameters. One of the things we had worked on, we're changing the requirements to only score within the 7 ring on the target. It was brought to our attention that we needed to address that issue with headshots because a lot of training facilities out there were still scoring them because training instructors felt, a headshot's a clean shot. Unfortunately, that's not how the new regs were done. So what we went in here and did was added, under target scoring on page 87 of the manual, we added the statement under section D where we just explicitly stated rounds discharged outside of the 7 ring shall not be scored. And this was an item that the subcommittee agreed with the language as addressing that concern that they had. Any questions on that one?
you have a question? Oh, I don't know. Okay.
So the next item that we had was the revisions we made to the firearms training written examination. I believe we discussed it briefly in January, but the firearms examination consists of a multiple choice test, and at the end of that test, there are two diagrams, and it's both nomenclature. There's a pistol or revolver and a semi-automatic handgun. Both of those require the applicant or student to go through and identify all the parts of the weapon. The way the answer sheet was scored was each section, there was a place to write in the answer for each section of each diagram. So instead of it being out of the total number of points, it added, so the entire exam should have been out of, looks like 52 points, but there was a place in here for 76 total points. So a lot of facilities were getting confused on the scoring and were asking clarifying questions in regards to how that was supposed to be scored. The way the examination is written, it states that each diagram is scored as 1 point. So the idea there is they label all parts of that diagram, and they have to get all of them right in order for it to be the 1 point. Unfortunately, the way that was presented on the answer sheet led to confusion. So we went through and looked at a better way of numbering the diagrams. So if you look at the old version, all the different answers, they had separate numbers. We went through and changed those diagrams to have Roman numerals associated with the answers for each diagram, and broke up the answer keys so that it's more specific. And the instructors can understand that the total examination is out of 52 points and not out of the 72 that was originally on there. So this was-
76.
Or 76, yeah, sorry. This is pretty non-substantive in regards to changes, because this is how it was meant to be done before. We just wanted to make it more user-friendly so that training facilities had an easier time understanding how to score.
And part of that also facilitated or aligned with the commitment of trying to reduce deficiencies, because when we had instructors scoring off of 76, the law says that an applicant must pass the written exam with a score of 85% or more. And when you're skewing the number of items that are being scored, that 85% bounced around. And the law also says that if somebody fails to score 85% the first time that they complete the written exam, they're required, I think it's 7585.6 of the Business Profession Code, requires them to complete the whole classroom instruction again. So having it, even though the actual manual explained how to score, there was still sufficient confusion amongst the instructors when they got to the score sheet. And so I know the committee brought that forth the last time during the meeting, and we looked at it and we thought it was a really good suggestion. We thought it aligned with the commitment of trying to enhance, efficiencies, reduce deficiencies. And so this is what we came up with. And then this is aligning also with the information that we've added to the actual application instructions for the instructors on how they're scoring and how they calculate the percentage.
So next steps with this will be the current version of the firearms training manual is currently online. We will add these additional edits that I previously discussed and update the manual to have that finalized on the website. The answer key, we're going to notify all the training facilities. We're going to send them a letter explaining the updates so they're aware of all those changes. They will have access to the manual online, and then we will mail out answer keys to the facilities so that they will have the new answer keys as well.
So the updated manual will be on the website, but the actual exam keys answers will be mailed.
Correct.
And, I just realized we didn't take a formal motion to adopt these. We basically adopted the manual last time with these two outstanding issues. Would the recommendation be that we formally adopt these as well? Yes? Okay. So I'm hearing the recommendation would be to take a motion that we're adopting the new manual with these new changes, these three changes to the carrying of the weapon, the scoring, and then the actual exam score diagrams. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Huntington?
Second, Eli Owen.
Any further comment regarding these proposed changes to the manual?
I had a question regarding the third page in the new firearm version test. Third page is the firearms written examination on the top. And then it says it's the answer key. Is that going to be the answer sheet where the applicants would complete the test answers on there?
Yeah, and we will be sending out the answer sheet along with the key and the new diagrams to the facilities.
So I would just suggest, instead of calling it the answer key, the answer sheet for the one the students are going to fill out, and then maybe an area on the bottom where the instructors have an area to list their name and training instructor number, and then the passing score, which should be a percentage, to kind of highlight the need for them to transfer that information to the initial application as a percentage rather than putting 50 correct. It should be the 98%.
And we didn't bring the key because of obvious reasons. At this point, it should only be shared with the instructors, but we can certainly take a look at that and make those adaptations. So what I got out of this is then we'll change this to answer sheet, the blank one, the actual one being answer key for the instructors, and then we will actually have down below a place for them to identify the actual score in percentage, and then signature, and then what was the third thing?
Name and their training instructor, their TIF.
So do I have an amendment to the motion? I need a new motion then. Formally, we never took up that motion, so I just get a new motion.
I'll make the motion with the suggested changes. Huntington?
Second, Owen.
Okay, so the motion before the committee is to adopt the change that is presented by Bureau staff with the amendments that we just discussed regarding changing nomenclature as it relates to the answer sheet and then the requirements for the answer key itself. Any discussion from the committee on this motion? Any comments from the public regarding the motion before the committee? Please come forward, sir. If you'd like to state, I'm sorry, go ahead.
My name is Phil Sacheret. I've been the BSIS instructor since 1993, and I've been teaching firearms all along. And I've noticed that there are a lot of things that the Bureau needs to know, as particular to the exam. I've been teaching some of the places where I found students were cheating on the test. Part of it I found was in the old days we used to have two test exams. I had one student come in, a foreign student come in and said, I want to take an exam. I'm like, I haven't given a class yet. And he said, well, I'm ready to take the test. Okay. So my cop mind says, this guy's doing something here. So I gave him test number 2. He got 100% wrong. I compared to test number 1, 100% right. He didn't know how to really read. He could barely speak English. And so what I've also found, that somebody's selling the answers. So these people were memorizing the answers, and I've known and seen people buying the answer sheet. And plus, in the classroom when we were testing the scores, we had the students help to test scores, even though we passed them out exchanged them, somebody was recording them on a separate sheet of paper. So I went up to the student, I said, "What are you doing?" I was just checking the right answers. I'm like, "No, you're writing on a piece of paper. You can't do that." So I took it away from him and shredded it. So I'm finding this happen. My suggestion is, in the future, they might want to change the order of the test wording, test answers, so that or questions, so that when the students come down the road, they'll come and take the test. If they have it memorized, they're going to have the wrong thing memorized because the order's been changed. If not, change the testing, maybe every 3 to 5 years. Or like they did before, had 2 different test booklets. So we were able to give one or the other and really keep these people on their toes as to, you got to be able to read this. Because one is you're required to read in English. That's part of the...
So when you said it used to be 2 test booklets, it was basically essentially the same material, same questions, but in a different scrambled order.
No, the 2 tests were really different questions in itself. So the student really had to know what's covered in the material.
My first reaction of 2 different sets of questions could be that you would have disparate treatment to applicants. One, if it's not the same set of questions, if it's 2 different sets of questions.
It seems to me, though, that what you first asked, if you had the exact same questions,
what I'm
but
saying,
in a different order,
That
Yeah.
would be okay.
I think that would be fine.
I
Yeah,
agree.
that
That's
might
why,
be
that's why I
easier.
asked if you were saying, that's why I was asking, were you saying it was the same set of questions but in a different order? And I apologize if I misunderstood the response. I thought you
no.
had said it was a different whole set of questions for one exam versus the
Well,
second exam.
that's one suggestion is to change the order of the questions.
Yes, that,
Which will be easier than to have 2 separate books and keep them too long. You need to change them every 3 to 5 years so that people don't memorize them and start selling them. And I've seen that happen quite a bit.
okay. Could you please spell your name so that we would get it correctly for the meeting minutes?
Last name is C-H-A, C as in Charles, H-A-C-H-E-R-E. And first of Phil, P-H-I-L.
And so, did you file any complaints with the Bureau regarding your concerns of what you were observing?
I did a few years ago, and they told me that whoever was the head of the Firearm Division told me that we're going to have a renewal update, like for you to come in and help us out with it. Well, I never got a call.
So that was before 2013?
Yes.
Okay. So I think at this point, if you've seen something that you believe is suspicious or of something that is, outside of what you would expect somebody coming in to complete the class with you, take the exam through you, is to file a complaint for the Bureau to be able to potentially look, and any information you can give as to the individual, the applicant, would be very helpful for us to look into this to see if there is any exam subversion activities going on. In regard to your suggestion about scrambling the questions, it's duly noted. It seems like a really good best practice, and we would like to consider that and continue to have a discussion potentially coming back before the committee on doing something along that line.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, call the vote.
Motion to accept changes made by Bureau staff to the Firearms Manual and include the changes suggested by Member Lujan. Simon Cruz. Marcel Egley.
Yes.
Marcel Egley, yes. Anton Farmby. Anton Farmby, yes. Frank Huntington.
Yes.
Frank Huntington, yes. Todd Inglis.
Yes.
Todd Inglis, yes. Matthew Lujan.
Yes.
Matthew Lujan, yes. Lynn Moorfield.
Yes.
Lynn Moorfield, yes. Nancy Murish.
Yes?
Nancy Murish, yes. Eli Owen.
Yes.
Eli Owen, yes. Stanton Perez.
Yes.
Stanton Perez, yes. Roy Ron.
Yes.
Roy Ron, yes. Tim Westfall. 10 ayes.
The motion passes. Thank you. So that takes us to item six, discussion on how employers can help their employees avoid application processing delays. And during our last meeting in January, Member Farm B raised this issue as a possible future agenda item. Some of this information is on the Bureau's website, but the handouts that are in your packet provides further explanation and teases out a little bit more on what these things how employers might be able to help their employees. With us today is Deputy Chief Clarissa Serrato Chavez to go over the issues identified in the handouts.
Good morning, everyone. So if you have the agenda item 6 out, I'll briefly go over the items, and then if you have any questions, I can address that. Basically, at this point, as Laura said, we have something similar to this on our website, but this provides a little bit more detail and it's been updated. I'm thinking we may be replacing what's on our website with this as time permits. So the number one thing is that you're using the current application. A lot of times we've received outdated applications where possibly specific information that is now required, maybe the conviction questions have changed and so on, and therefore we're not able to accept that application and triggers a deficiency, and we have to send the person a deficiency letter along with the new application and then ask them to resubmit. We ask that you make sure if you're assisting your staff or your employees that are going to be, or even your students that are going to be submitting their application, that it's completed completely and accurately. You'd be surprised how many times we receive an app with no date of birth or no social security number. Somebody fails to sign the application. As soon as one of those items is missing, the application's deficient and you are now starting that entire deficiency process. You also want to make sure you're paying the correct fee. This is, I know, going to be somewhat of a challenge for individuals currently because of the change. The new renewals are going out at the end of April. And then the new fees will be, for initial applications, will be effective July 1st, as Laura has stated. So we anticipate there's going to be errors from individuals submitting possibly an old application and it has the outdated fee. Therefore, they're supplying the incorrect fee. Our central cashiering will be returning those back to the individual, guiding them to the new application. So we basically will most likely not have record that application came in because cashiering, as soon as it arrives, it's the wrong fee amount, they're going to return it to the individual.
And so something that we frequently see with the incorrect application is the employers will photocopy the application if they're going to do paper, and they just keep it. And then they hand that out to the employees without ever going back to double check, is this actually the current application form? And we see this a lot in the alarm industry, but we also just see it across the board. I mean, it happens across the board. But again, that having that current application form is pivotal to making sure that all the requirements under current law are being satisfied.
Yes, I think last year we received an ACE application that was like dated from the 1990s. And I don't know where but it came in the door and most of us didn't recognize it. It was like, what is it? We hadn't seen one, so it happens. Moving on to item 4, illegible fingerprints. This is something that we call rejects. So the Department of Justice will notify us there's a reject, and basically it can mean that somebody, for whatever reason, whether there was issues with their digits, bottom line they couldn't get a good read, we'll get a reject notice. We'll notify the individual, we've received the reject notice, you need to go print again. We may end up with a second reject, and when that happens, then our process is to submit what they call an FBI name check. Then Department of Justice attempts to do the background based on the FBI name check process. And then there's still instances where once it's been brought to our attention that somebody, for whatever reason, has been waiting for several months and we've just not received anything from the Department of Justice, then we have our liaisons internally that are designated where they reach out to see if it's possible to understand why we haven't received any responses. Number 5 is explaining as far as when we receive a delayed response. And this can be for many reasons. It could be a delayed because there is information that's being researched further by Department of Justice. But I've also confirmed that just because the Bureau receives a delay does not mean that there is criminal offender information. It's just basically something that we have to deal with and is out of our control. Criminal history. When we do receive criminal history information, that obviously will increase the processing time for that application, because now our disciplinary review unit or that unit needs to review the rap sheet that's arrived, and they make the determination if it's substantially related to that application or not. So those that are, they end up in the denial process. Those that are deemed issuable, then the application is approved and the license is issued.
So in regards to the how can the employer help, items 3 are the most pivotal, and items 4 through 6 are just explanations that are beyond employers, the bureaus, the applicant's control, that those things, if they fall into that, they're inherently going to take longer. But I think the number one thing, as Clarissa pointed out, is complete. If they're going to submit in a paper, filling every item out and being very careful in how they're completing it. Because she'll talk a little bit about when things don't match, even on paper apps, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Because bottom line, in the end, when it comes to fingerprints matching the application, obviously if somebody's applied online, our goal, especially for the registrants, is that the prints sync up with the application and it does not require manual intervention from any staff. Obviously those would be for clearances. If there's something there that comes through, it's going to get held up until somebody reviews the information that came in. But if a clearance comes through from Department of Justice, then the application would match up and it would approve and issue based on our batch processes during the evening.
Clarissa, could you clarify for me? So we have a paper app,
Yes.
and let's say that individual live scanned, and so the fingerprints are sitting already there by the time the technician is entering the data. If they enter the data and everything is identical to what was in the live scan, does Brees automatically sync, or does it, at that point it still requires manual synchronization?
For a hard copy app, we put items in place so that a person has to actually work the application, because there might be information that needs to be keyed in. So that information is being keyed in by our staff for a hard copy application, so it will not automatically approve.
Okay, so
And if the prints, because even though it's a hard copy application, the prints may not match automatically, but because the individual is working the application, our process is, if the prints aren't there, you go see if the prints arrived and just happened not to match. So then they do their matching report and they bring that information over if it's found.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to bring forth, that the
Yes.
matching report will take longer. So if the individual, same thing that's going to talk about in a minute, Brees, if they're transposing date of birth information or social information between what they're entering on the paper app for the technician to enter versus what's in DOJ, then it's going to be not matching automatically, and you have to go through fallout reports to find them?
No,
Okay.
as the person's working it, I mean, it would take that individual a few more minutes.
Got it.
To process that particular application.
So the transpositions aren't as critical on a paper as they are in Brees,
Correct.
but the fact that all the data fields have to be completed is what's pivotal on a paper.
Correct.
Okay.
So, moving on underneath item 6, these instances, 1, 2, and 3, is related to why the live scan results or the fingerprints will not match the application. And the first one is obviously the name. We're looking for the first name and the last name. It has to match identically to the application. So however the live scan operator entered it, and as how the application was submitted, it should match identically. Otherwise, it's not going to match. The item number 2 would be if there's a typo with the social security number or the date of birth. And then lastly, the last item would be, you've used the wrong live scan form to apply for this particular application. This seems to happen a lot for our proprietary versus guard. For some reason, they mix those live scans up quite often. And our website basically lists the section on our website where the live scan forms are housed. It lists, this is your live scan form for security guard. So it breaks it down as to which live scan form you should be using based on the license type that you're applying for. That will happen, and then that would cause a delay. So even if somebody applies online for a guard and they happen to grab the proprietary and went and live scan with that, it's not going to match up automatically because it's looking for the app type.
Can you clarify a little bit? I want to clarify a bit. So
Sure.
Brees is designed that if the information that the applicant enters into Brees, wow, my pen just really did something bad. Hopefully it's not on my face. The applicant enters his or her name and personal identifier information. They go to get live scanned. The live scan operator enters his or her personal identifier information, his or her name, and then obviously the fingerprints. Brees is designed that if those points of the personal identifiers match and there's no criminal history, it automatically syncs and gets issued the license. So that's why you hear anecdotally folks say, hey, I got licensed in just a couple of days, because very much of it is automated driven. However, we have about 15 to 20% of applications, and when we're talking about 5,000 applications a month, that's a significant number, right? That, as Clarissa was saying, into number one and two, there's different data that's entered by the applicant versus the live scan operator. Commonly, you have variations of names. So Brees is going to see one name as Don coming in from the applicant, another one from Donald coming in from the live scan. Brees is not intuitive to say, oh, well, Don is a short name for Donald. And so it sits out there unmatched. So it's not going into the automated process. So, and these are for individuals that don't have any criminal history background. They've now lost that great feature of Brees of being able to be automatically synced and move on the door and get their license. So they use variations of names, or somebody transposes a date of birth digit or social security number digit. Brees is not intuitive enough to see all the well, is this a different person or is it the same person? So now what's happened is you have a universe for these folks that don't have a criminal history background, doesn't require manual review, that now didn't get the benefit of the automation and now have to sit over here until Bureau staff
Or it's working the exception report.
work the exception report.
So there's the 3 points. It's your first and last name, your social security number, and your date of birth. Those are the 3 things that have to be identical in order for everything to sync up.
How specific is it? And I give the example, my TSA pre-check, if they don't, it's Frank W. Huntington III. And if the ticket agency doesn't put in the third, it doesn't match up. Is it that specific?
So again, it's that first and last name, because there's people that submit their middle name, there's people that submit a suffix. So it all has to do with that. If you happen to put Huntington III in your last name field, and then you keyed in your application separately, we may run into that issue.
Okay, but as long as it's Frank W. Huntington III and everything is in a proper place, Frank Huntington's going to match
So
up.
it's looking at that first
Gotcha.
and last name.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna clarify. So the life, so Frank goes in for guard app, say hypothetically, and he puts Frank Huntington. Does Brees have a suffix field separate for him to put the third?
There are suffixes there.
Okay, so he would do Frank Huntington and then
So
the
whatever
third.
you're doing in your live scan, you want to make sure you're doing the same.
Well, that's
thing.
why. So
Right.
that's why I was asking, because does the live scan? So I don't know if the live scan functionality has a suffix, and if we have him putting in a suffix in the Brees and live scan not having that
Right,
suffix,
so
could
it would be recommended that you use your first and last name, because obviously we're not sure what's available for the live scan operator, what their fields are.
That's why I'm saying that I think you need to be very careful. And that, Anton,
Yeah.
is what's very critical, particularly for folks like in my culture, Hispanics, that we have a lot of hyphenated names.
My name?
Yes, and even just inherently in the culture of married women and just how you do it, and or even children and how they maybe take the mother's maiden name as part of their middle name, and
Right.
and if they're entering different things at different places, they've now lost the beauty of Brees, which is that automated benefit.
Or even if it's the same name, like if it's a Maria Lopez, like how how does that work into play when you talk about the names and the social security numbers? I really appreciate the clarification, Chief, on 1 and 2. I do have a question on number 3. When we talk about the proprietary private security officer form versus the security guard form, it seems to me that that is almost inherently a automatic situation where it can be mistaken. I mean, just for in my organization alone, one of the things that we've done to try to hopefully professionalize the industry is we use the term security officer versus guard, which sometimes has a negative connotation to it. So I can easily see how someone may be going in with an application and they see one set of form that has like proprietary private security officers versus the guard. Has there been a lot of typos and issues and mistakes regarding number 3 versus 1 and 2?
I feel like majority of it is 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
On occasion, it will be number 3. And this, I've seen it not even just between these two. I've seen somebody grab a PPO live scan and submit that for a guard. It's basically, I mean, I feel that the website, if they look at the website and they see all the license types, but also, I believe it's listed as security guard, and then the other one is the full proprietary private security officer. Sometimes they might just see officer and they jump to that. I feel like this is more with individuals that are brand new, that are new to the industry, and they're not very familiar with all the different license types. And we've actually have individuals that have actually applied for a proprietary and they meant to apply for a guard. So that happens as well. And then it just depends on the situation or how far along they are in the process, you know, the direction that we take with those.
But from what you're saying, it seems that if there is at least an emphasis and focus on the 1 and 2, that would help kind of move the process along and eliminate the delay.
Well, if they get everything with 1 and 2 correct, but they still use the incorrect live scan form, they've now lost the beauty of it. And just remember that the reason for that is it's different. They're called ORI, agency originating numbers with DOJ. So for us, we have for each different live scan form, there's a separate account established with the California Department of Justice, and it's coming in recognizing it from that ORI. You have a separate code, and so it's just not synchronizing. So folks really need to do, you know, and maybe that's a good thing as we consider the update of the initial security guard application, is that when we put on there, this application is associated with this live scan form. And the proprietary officer, again, so this is all the stuff that as we're updating, we've updated the renewals and kind of thought this intuitive things that will help guide folks. And this is something we may want to consider actually on the initial application forms itself. And the person who's been updating the forms, I see her taking notes. So it's just something that we'll add to the instruction sheet that, you know, reminder, this application must be use this live scan form.
And we also configured Brees because some of the live scan forms are shared between certain license types. So there was a hierarchy for Brees that was configured to make sure, and this was more for like when somebody's applying for a company and a qualified manager at the same time, like you're coming in for an RA and an RAQ, and they're a principal. So because there's not a live scan form for every single license type that we have, some of them are shared. So it's good to look at the website so that you can see if you're going to do this, you need this live scan form. And then it's configured within Brees to basically when this response comes in, we had to configure the hierarchy. You're going to hit this application first, then this application, then this application. So there's a little bit more to it behind the scenes, specifically for BSIS Brees because of the number of license types that we have.
Chief, I had a couple points, if I could, please. So we're talking about suffixes on the applications. So my company provides live scan as well, so I'm very familiar with the live scan process. On the data entry on live scan, there is an area for suffix. However, on the state application for the guard card, there's not a specific area to enter a suffix. And on that point, there's not a specific area on the application to put an apartment number.
To put in a what number?
An apartment number on the guard card paper application. So as you know, if it's sent out to 123 Main Street without an apartment number, it gets kicked back. They never receive the hard card in the mail. So on the guard card application, paper application, I would suggest adding a field for suffix and adding a field for apartment number.
Well, I'm just hoping that, I mean, the suffix, I'm worried then now we may up. I guess it's just training folks that whatever they're doing on one place, they do it over here. And I never thought, because honestly, there's a lot of apps that you fill out, and even when I lived in apartments, if it didn't have apartment, when it said address, I would put the address and then common apartment number. But I think I'm hearing from you.
I
that
see
some folks
applicants
may get
every day,
confused.
and it doesn't happen that way, unfortunately.
Okay, so
And-
maybe what we can do is just put on the, and we won't be able to do the renewals right now, but it will, because those are up now, but maybe on the new ones, that will say address / suite, apartment number.
Correct.
City, okay.
It'll help.
It just feels like it's intuitive, but you're right.
And then also on that point, it seems like there's a challenge with people completing the correct live scan or using the correct live scan form. So since that is part of the application process, maybe you attach that live scan, the correct live scan form to the application. So if it's a proprietary, that live scan form is at the end of that application. If it's the paper guard card, that live scan form is at the end of that paper application. So people are not having to go to different pages and use different links to find the correct live scan form for that specific license or certification that they're applying for.
So one thing that we have been talking about in the policy unit, Antoine is the policy manager and Nicole is the analyst, is kind of looking at the website, is currently we were going to make map buckets of license types. So you would basically, if you're interested in a security guard, you would click on the security guard, then it would take you to a separate page. And then it would have the security guard initials, security guard renewal. We were going to put the live scan form right there on separate link on the page, and then put like maybe a fact sheet associated. That's kind of the vision that we're working toward. I guess my question would be now is, do you think not having a separate link to the live scan, but actually making it part of, like, if they click on the initial, then it be this whole packet? Or do you see that what we were kind of envisioning being a positive move as well?
I definitely see what you have envisioned being a positive. Just so it relates to the actual application that they're applying for. Because I think how it is now, everything's on one page. So PPO, PSO, so they're all
No, I
there,
agree.
they're broken out, but
I
they're
think-
still on one page.
So we were kind of heading in that same direction with the vision of having the link, like we said, you click on what application, security guard, it takes you to a separate page, and then on that security guard page, it has all this stuff together. And I think that's the approach we were looking at, as opposed to combining it into the application form itself. Because we're going to have a Word document, PDF document, and then a PDF coming in, and I feel like it's going to be cleaner for us, the way we put it all together, to have the application, and then if we have it set up on the web page, that the live scan form associated with that would be a link right with it.
That sounds good. And the last point of the live scan, we talked about this before, is kind of helping in that automation if the social security number is entered by the live scan operator. That's not required. It's not required for the live scan operator to do. If that social security number is not on the request for live scan service form, the live scan technician is not going to put it into the record for the live scan. The way to fix that is just like the teacher credentialing live scan, a social security number is required. So
Well-
maybe that should be hard encoded for all the Bureau of Security live scans, social
Well,
security number.
If it's, so if
required.
they're able to put is required, it's because they have the statutory authority to include that information on the application. We don't. However, what we've been doing with the renewal in trying to get there and having some of this additional information is we'll put optional, but then we'll say see instructions, and under the instructions, we say the benefit of putting that there, that information there. And so we can certainly take that same on and completing the live scan form instructions. While optional, the Bureau suggests including this because it facilitates, and we could, X, Y, Z on how it facilitates.
Sounds good. It's only a benefit for them if the whole automation happens. They're going to get their license approved a lot quicker.
Thank you. Great suggestions.
So moving on to the next section where it says working with a web printout for approved initial applications. This section lists out the different license types that can work with a web printout once the license has been approved and issued. You'll notice these specific ones will be slightly different than the license types that can work with a web printout when a renewal has been approved. This particular one for initials is security guard, and if you pay attention to the firearm permit, it's only for security guard, private patrol operator, and the qualified manager of the TPO. So it is very important to pay attention as to which license types can work with the web printout prior to receiving the hard copy mailed to your home. And then also, when it comes to the renewals, there's a slight difference between who can work with a web printout from our website. As far as renewal applications, some of the common pitfalls is that individuals fail to renew on time, or they wait until the last minute to submit a renewal form, and then we're getting a call that their license has expired and I submitted it 2 days ago, why don't I have it? And that happens often. So as far as the registrants, the guard, locksmith, alarm, and repossession, they are required by law to submit them 60 days prior to expiration. We don't see this very often. We also suggest that other application types that are not required by law that also submit it at least 60 days prior to expiration. I would say if you're able to renew online, that is the way to go because as we've said previously, you're renewing in real time. So as soon as the payment is updated based on your Visa, your credit card, then the system will update. And you will normally see your expiration date, basically the 2 years out from the date. When you're renewing online, it will also reflect, if you're past expiration and you're due for a delinquency fee, all of that is calculated. So for the new fees that are now going to be in place after when these renewals go out in April, if you're going online to renew and your license is expiring July 2018 and forward, you will see those new fees reflected online as well. Again, we ask that that you want to use the current applications. The current renewal, as we've just stated, that we've recently updated the renewal applications. Those are now posted on our website. So it's best at this point moving forward that you, as being employers or having students, go to the website and see, and periodically check, has there been any updates? Obviously, if you're part of the interested parties list, you will get that email. And then, if you're paying attention to that, then, normally we're sending out blasts each time there's an addition to the website or if there's a change on the form. As I talk to people that are having issues, I normally ask, are you part of our interested parties list? Because they always say, I didn't know. And when I'm talking to them, I'm like, are you a part of the interested parties list? And usually the answer is no, I'm not. So then I guide them and ask them, this is, especially if it's a company or a facility, this is what you want to do just so that you're on top and up to date with everything that's going on with the Bureau. Timely notification of address change. Some individuals fail to notify us, although it's required by law, of their address change. And what happens is they don't get the renewal notice in the mail because it's been mailed to their old address. And then they're scrambling to figure out, how do I renew? So our website does include the renewal forms, but they can also renew online. This is something that we're asking, you may, if just so that if you are submitting a renewal, the renewal coupon, and you're doing the address change at that time, there will be a delay because you're selecting the box that I've had an address change, and then on the back, you've put your new address. It goes through the processor in the cashiering department, and then a hold is placed on it because now somebody has to go in our office and update the address. So there will be a delay there. We ask that, you submit the address change as soon as possible. If you're waiting until the last minute and you figure, well, I'm going to be renewing and I'll do the address change at the time, you just need to be aware and inform your staff and, your employees, your students that there will be a delay because somebody has to actually update your address.
And that address can't be updated until that document comes from the cashiering office. It gets into a stack of incoming apps. That work gets processed out. So if you're waiting until you change your address at the time of renewal, you're going to be sitting there with normal processing times of that app sitting on the shelf for a period of time because
Right. It's
just the volume is so high and it's just very difficult to pull out each one if they've changed it. So change as soon as they know. 30 days is required by law.
And then also, as we discussed in the initial, that you want to make sure that they're paying the correct renewal fee. And again, we are preparing because we anticipate there being errors in the beginning when individuals are submitting a renewal fee and they're confused about what their renewal fee is supposed to be. We're providing the information, and it's on our website. We've updated the forms. We've worked with cashiering so that they understand as well, and we've had meetings with staff so that those that are staffing the phones can explain if the call comes in, so that they can explain what's transpiring with the renewal fees, that they're taking place at the beginning of at the end of this month. Those renewal forms will start going out, as well as the changes that are going to be taking place July 1st for the initial applications. And then also individuals not signing the documents as they're turning them in. So a renewal form, again, any form, any application you're submitting to the Bureau, you want to make sure it's completed in its entirety, including a signature. We see a lot of this too for company renewals because our company techs are paying attention to who's signing that company renewal form. When they get that renewal form and they'll validate against what's on our system, who signed this renewal form. If it's not a principal, then we're reaching out because now who signed this renewal form? This isn't anybody that we have registered on the license listed as a principal, and we want to prevent anything that may where an individual may attempt to take over another license, and so we have that validation in place when those renewals are coming in, that especially for companies that they're checking to see the individual who signed, because you might have a corporation with many officers, that it is one of the officers listed on the renewal. And then again, as I mentioned, these are the particular license types that once a renewal has been approved and you don't have your card in hand yet, but you could go to the Bureau's website and work with the web printout. And at this time for the renewals, if you'll notice, the firearm permit, it's only for the security guards that can work on a approved renewal from the website. Do you have any questions regarding these?
No, but this is great. This is, I would definitely use this with the employers who we deal with. I think this would help expedite the process to prevent any, delays in the process. The one thing that I just want to acknowledge, though, is that regardless of how great the information is, if it's not being utilized, then it's pointless. So I'm going to do my part with the employers to make sure that they get this to help expedite the process. Thank you. This is great. This is helpful.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, do the training facilities, maybe when you make a really good point, how good is the information if no one's really aware of it? We put it on the website, we do the interested parties blast. We're starting to work, Anton is starting to work on our Facebook again, and that might be something that we put on there. But what about, the training facilities, as they're these folks are coming in the door and letting them know about these tools that are out there? Is that something? Yeah, you've given us a lot of suggestions. Can I turn it around here and say, has it something that maybe the facilities can help us as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can work with Roy on that, and we can definitely make that stronger point. I can talk personally that we definitely do that, and then of course push online registration wherever applicable and possible. And I think that helps out with avoiding a lot of the delays.
Yeah, I mean, even if you say you're having folks you're there, use a computer there, maybe having something like this in plastic where you just take 3 bulleted points, make sure you do this, make sure you do that as they're entering the information right there.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think we could work together, and as you know, CalSega will take important information from the Bureau that gets sent out in your e-blast, and we send out our own e-blast, and we certainly will do that in this case.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Clarissa.
The next item is mine also.
Yeah, so any further questions from the committee regarding item 6? Any questions or comments from the public regarding item 6? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, which is a discussion how employers can use the Brees License Notification Subscriptions tool to monitor the licensure status of their employees. And this item also aligns with Mr. Farnby's request for this type of information to be included in a future meeting. And Clarissa and I have been sharing and discussing the handouts that are in your packet regarding this tool as we've done presentations to industry associations, as well as met with different individuals from these various associations on when they started asking questions of how do I know if one of my employees doesn't renew or if you auto suspend them. And so this is a real important tool to be able to help track that. And so, like I said, you've got a handout in your packet, and Clarissa will be walking you through these as well.
I don't know if you want me to walk you through the whole thing because it's just a step-by-step.
Well, I mean,
but-
just the key points of it, yeah.
So basically, the first handout I'd like you to look at is how to subscribe to license notifications. It does require you to create a account on Brees in order for you to be able to subscribe. So if you're a company and you know, a PPO or alarm company, and you want to know the statuses of all your employees, you can go through this process and subscribe to their license type on your account so that you will get an email anytime there's a status change. So if they slip into delinquent or if they get suspended for any reason, each time that happens, you'll receive an email.
And can you explain briefly delinquent versus expired, what those means, canceled?
So delinquent, which right now the way it's been updated on Brees, it now says expired. So a guard can be, for example, delinquent for 60 days after expiration. So they will reflect as expired. After those 60 days from expiration, it's going to go into a canceled status.
And just to kind of help explain, the law allows a security guard registration to be renewed up to 60 days after expiration, which is the distinction between it saying delinquent, so.
And then we also have those guards that are auto-suspended because a conviction arrived for them. So then when that happens, and I know when we've had meetings with industry where they're not sure, you know, other than checking the website on their own, and if they have 100 employees, that makes it very difficult. So this subscription would allow them to automatically get the email. For those companies that are large, what I would suggest is, because you have to create your account, it may be in your best interest if you have a large company to have a separate account for just tracking subscriptions from your employees, so you're getting statuses. Because if you're using your one Brees account, you're going to get all the information related to your licenses. And then on top of that, you'll have information listed of all the individuals that you've subscribed to. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an employee. You can subscribe to any licensee out there, and you're going to be getting updates. Basically, yes. And then so if I find the page where it would show you, so a few pages in, I'm sorry, it's not numbered. When you get to the quick start menu, This is where, if you look under additional activities, there's one tab that says, there's a section that says add an authorized representative. That's where the employee themselves or you can add an authorized representative to access your license. But underneath that one, there's license notification subscriptions.
So Clarissa, which handout are we looking at?
It's the one, this, how to subscribe.
How to subscribe to license, not to how to create the account, how to subscribe.
Right, that's what
Okay,
I stated
thank
in
you.
the beginning. Yes.
Thank you.
So, if you get to the page where it's the quick start menu, there's license notification subscriptions. This is where you would go to and select. And then it'll walk you through the process of, so this is a step-by-step. If you follow these steps, you should be able to subscribe to whoever you want, whether it be your employees, whether it be your competition, you can subscribe. And you will, and I've had some phone calls. Hey, did you know so-and-so's license went into delinquent? And I'm like, which is expired? And I was like, no. And then I'm wondering, well, the subscription works. And they're telling me this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's used in other capacities other than tracking your own employees and the statuses. But again, you can use your own account that you use to house your licenses and then subscribe. But for those really large companies that have, I don't know, hundreds and thousands, or they have their entire like HR shop that's responsible for these types of things and monitoring, I would suggest that they create a separate Brees account so that that individual can then track those, and then it's not interfering with everything else that's going on with yours. If you're a smaller business, it might not be a big deal, but for those that are very large, it would be suggested that you do this. I know that the Brees will only allow you to set up one VO account or online account per email, so you can't use the same email account. So if you have an email account dedicated to your company, and then you plan to create a separate account for your staff, your HR person that's going to be monitoring, you will have to provide a separate email account. It won't allow it. If you follow the steps through this, on this guide, you shouldn't have any issues. You can always email the Bureau and we can walk you through if you need additional help. The other handout is related to how to create your Brees VO account, which I did include it in the first one, so it does walk you through from beginning to end, creating the account and then subscribing. This one originally is how to create your VO account and onboard your license. We do get calls, and then there's the Brees Help Desk where individuals struggle to sometimes onboard their license, maybe because they're not understanding or they don't have this guide. And I feel that this guide, it walks you through every screen that they're seeing when they're creating their account. So I had one of our Brees Smiths, Charmaine McLean, who was helped with the configuration. I had her create these a few months ago, and we've been using them. And then if anybody asks or they're struggling to onboard their license and so on, we have this to refer to. Right now, these are available on, they were just recently added to the DRC because of the advisory, but I've been talking to staff. The goal was to eventually have these posted to our web permanently, just as a tool for anybody that gets stuck. There are tutorials, but they're videos. If you go to the Brees, and it's hard to like watch a video, and then when you're trying to do something. So we figured having a handout where they could just give to their staff and say, this is how you have to create your account or onboard, or for anybody that's going to create their Brees account, onboard their license, or that they want to subscribe to their employees or students or whatever it may be. I feel that these guides would help you, and they are step by step. Any questions?
I have a question, please. What is the timeliness of receiving a notification? Say, for example, the Disciplinary Review Board takes action. How quickly would this notification come to an employer?
So when they update the license, because in that, from the discipline side, once the discipline is rendered, whether it be suspension, that automatically updates the license status. So you may be getting an email, you would be getting an email as soon as it sees the license status. So when the batches run, I would say probably within a day, you will receive an email.
That's quick.
It freezes in real time, so as soon as the information's updated in the database, it will be reflective.
I would just like to add for you and your staff, everybody who worked on it. I know these things take a long time, and it was a response to an earlier conversation, earlier meeting. This is very helpful to the industry to know right away whether that officer should be on the street or requires some help in processing their license. So really appreciate all the hard work and the time that went into doing this.
Yeah, I second that.
Excellent. Any other questions from comments from the committee? Any questions or comments on this item from the public? Seeing none, let's go to the fun one. Item 8, discussion on schedule for future advisory committee meetings. So during the January meeting, I raised the issue, or the Bureau raised the issue as to whether the committee meetings of 4 times a year is appropriate, and noted that several meetings were having to be canceled primarily due to pressing issues facing the Bureau. As a result, the committee had been meeting pretty much on average about twice a year. So during our discussions in January, we talked about the possibility of having 3 meetings a year. We also discussed the operational need for the Bureau to focus on the efforts of ensuring the successful transition to the new firearm assessment and the new fees, and made the determination that we were formally canceling the July meeting. And so I'm going to put that forth if that still stands, and I'm hoping it does, because we do have a lot of things going on. But ultimately, the discussions ended with that we would continue having a discussion regarding the future meetings. And so before us again today is really what is that optimal number of what we should be meeting annually? And want to have discussion? Do we have a motion and then discussion? I put it forth to the committee for feedback.
I have a question, Chief. I remember the conversation we had kind of like toward the tail end of our last meeting. Where we ended or where we landed, if I recall, was having 3 meetings. Is that what we said?
That was put forth, but we never took a motion. That's why I guess when I was talking in my narrative here, we did raise 3. There was also consideration of maintaining it to 4 with the potential of cancellation based on operational needs.
Okay.
The last that I recall that is if we went to 3, would that eliminate the need to have cancellations? Because then, everyone felt there's a great benefit to having these ongoing, continued, quarterly, discussions. And so we really put the proposal forth, but we never landed on it.
I'm going to make a motion that we schedule 3 meetings a year, Huntington.
Seconded, Morfeld?
Any comments from the committee regarding the motion?
Yes.
I think it's a reasonable amount and fair to the board members that have to travel.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for the motion. I think that the motion of 3 makes sense. I would like to have some clarification on the cancellation piece of it, because I feel, just speaking for myself personally, all of the work that the Bureau staff has in front of them, sometimes it requires immediate attention. Sometimes things kind of get in the way, and I think the Bureau being able to have that flexibility is important. Because it's one thing to have these conversations, but it's another thing to actually do the work on the ground. My only concern is what the impact would be on this body. That if we have 3 meetings a year, and let's just say there's a need to cancel 2. And what the impact of that means on any of the discussions or any of the topics that we need to discuss. I do believe, just for the record, that that flexibility should be there, because I think it's important for the Bureau to be able to do that. But also, I'm just concerned about the impact that it has on this committee, the work.
So are you saying the concern of having 3 is if the Bureau's had a pattern of canceling 2, that really is going to bring us down to 1, as opposed to if we are spreading them further apart, then maybe we won't have the need to cancel two, and it will likely end up with just, if the worst case scenario, one.
Yes, that's kind of, yes, that's getting to the point. But also, I think if you look at it on the flip side of it, if we go to three, maybe there will not be a need to cancel as many. I mean,
And that's the point,
you know,
yes.
yeah, so.
Can,
I see a question from Mr. Owen.
I'm sorry, Chief.
That's okay.
To address maybe the concern by Mr. Farmby, can we add 3 meetings and also at the discretion of the chief to call a meeting? So if there is an urgent business or an urgent need that the staff is,
I like that.
You like
it
that?
gives us discretion to call together something if it needs it outside of the 3 set meetings.
And as the maker of the motion, I would accept that as a friendly amendment. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
About the, are we keeping the full day or just the half day? Did we briefly talked about that, but I don't think we came up with a decision.
Ultimately, if we are bringing things forth, the experience that I've had is, I mean, today was kind of a light agenda because everybody acknowledged the Bureau's got a lot going on and to get prepared for today. I would say folks are incurring their time, the expenses, all that we come and have some substantive dialogue, which usually does entail not a 4-hour meeting, but a 6-hour meeting. It's been my experience. I don't know if the committee concurs. So I would say that in regards to the time, we strive for 6, and then similarly to what was done today, where the Bureau had more pressing issues, and in the spirit of keeping a 3-committee schedule, there would be times that committee schedules would be shorter. The agenda would be shorter to recognize some of the issues.
I agree with you. I think it should be your discretion.
Okay. So the question I would have then too, if we need to modify the motion at all, is in the past, we had the 4 meetings set on the second Thursday of every 3rd month. Do we want to have an established schedule to that same effect, or do we want to loosely put approximate in the committee? I mean, that's going to be additional work for the staff because then it's hard to get the quorum, get everybody here. So I'm seeing nods to probably established dates. Okay, so I can tell you right now, straight up, that April hearings are tough. And one of the reasons they're primarily tough for the Bureau is legislation. We're right in the middle of a lot of legislative activities, budget, we've been going down to sub-4 hearings, pre-hearings to be presenting our budget change proposals, engaging on legislation. So the month of April is not good. I've also found from January, many of you find it a little bit tough coming back right after the holidays and getting right back into the groove. So I don't know if folks are thinking like a March, summer, and then in November. I mean, do you have any thoughts to that effect?
Chief, if I can, just a point of order, perhaps suggesting that we vote on the motion for the 3 meetings a year and then move on to the actual scheduling.
Okay. So I want to make sure we have a clear motion. So the clear taken, duly noted. And we'll have to also take public comment here, but to repeat the motion before the committee is to schedule 3 meetings a year with the discretion of the Bureau Chief to call a 4th if based on operational need necessity to have the committee meet.
Correct.
Okay. Any other further comment from the committee regarding that specific motion? And we've had a first and a second, correct on that already? Yes. So do I have any comment from the public regarding the motion that's coming before the committee for vote? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Motion to schedule 3 advisory committee meetings per year with the discretion given to the chief to call a 4th meeting. Simon Cruz, Marcel Egley,
Yes.
Marcel Egley, yes. Anton Farmby,
Yes.
Anton Farmby, yes. Frank Huntington,
Yes.
Frank Huntington, yes. Todd Inglis,
Yes.
Todd Inglis, yes. Matthew Lujan,
Yes.
Matthew Lujan, yes. Lynn Morfeld,
Yes.
Lynn Morfeld, yes. Nancy Murish,
Yes.
Nancy Murish, yes. Eli Owen,
Yes.
Eli Owen, yes. Stanton Perez,
Yes.
Stanton Perez, yes. Roy Ron,
Yes.
Roy Ron, yes. Tim Westfall. Motion passes with 10-0.
Okay. Okay, so now, based on the recommendation and the spirit of having set dates, thoughts, comments?
I think that considering we're going to 3, it might be, I think, a good consideration to think about maybe doing like something like in February and something in June and then maybe in September, October. I think that if we taking into what you're speaking to, Chief, around like April, and January being tough with the committee, it kind of delays things a little bit that allow people a little bit more flexibility to be able to make the meeting. So once every 4 months kind of breaks down from that perspective, like maybe something in the, February, something in the summer around June, and then maybe sometime in the fall of, like October or something to that effect.
Yeah, I would go for October over September just because the legislature is winding down. Bills have been enacted. We're doing enrolled bill reports. We're doing all things along that line. So if that third one would be probably October. Do we have set dates?
Yeah, it's certainly easier for me to schedule my year if I know on the second Tuesday of October, I'm gonna have an advisory board meeting.
So are you saying not the second Tuesdays of the month?
No, I just came up with the second Tuesday because I'm hungry and
I know. I was about to say, do you want to break my leg? But we've got just so many things we're going to just push through. We've been doing it the second Thursday.
Is there any concern with anyone on the committee or any issues with the current Thursday? I mean, is there any way that we can just keep it the same?
It's a fine Thursday for me.
Is that third?
Or the second Thursday, the second Thursday. So I just want to make sure there's nothing weird with holidays or anything.
I do have one other thing I'd like to ask. How many of my fellow advisory board members come up from the South? Do we have the possibility of having one meeting a year in the South?
Oh, Simon, there's 2 more actually, because Simon comes from Ward Ventura. And how about, who else is in here?
Is Ventura really the South?
So I know that if we do it down south, I think we lose the ability for webcasting. Is that correct, sir? Oh, okay. So the Bureau would have OIS staff travel down. So we'd have to find a venue.
Where's Tim from? Is he from down south? Tim Westfall? Tim's not here, correct? He's not? He's from up here?
So, so can we, similarly to what we did before, make a motion to establish the dates and then have another discussion on whether we should alternate the venue?
Great.
Would that be okay? So, okay, so what I'm hearing from the committee is February, June, and October as being months for meetings. And I'm hearing, I believe, that keeping the second Thursday is still good?
Yes.
Okay, so then the motion do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Lujan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Farnby.
So the motion, okay, any further discussion regarding the motion of to have the meetings February, June, and October, the second Thursday? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Motion to schedule the advisory committee meetings on the second Thursday in February, June, and October. Simon Cruz, Marcel Egley,
Yes?
Marcel Egley, yes. Anton Farnby,
Yes.
Anton Farnby, yes. Frank Huntington,
Yes.
Frank Huntington, yes. Todd Inglis,
Yes.
Todd Inglis, yes. Matthew Lujan,
Yes.
Matthew Lujan, yes. Lynn Morfeld,
Yes.
Lynn Morfeld, yes. Nancy Murish,
Yes.
Nancy Murish, yes. Eli Owen,
Yes.
Eli Owen, yes. Stanton Perez,
Yes.
Stanton Perez, yes. Roy Ron,
Yes.
Roy Ron, yes. Tim Westfall. Motion passes 10-0.
Okay, so I'm going to put a monkey wrench in this. So we agreed previously that we would allow the Bureau to have time to implement everything for July 1. Can we have a motion to, for this year, not have the June hearing?
I'll make a motion to
Yeah, okay.
Then we did not have a June hearing.
2018 hearing.
Yes, 2018. Egley, E-G-L-E-Y.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second, Farm.
Any comments on not having a hearing this June from the committee, from the public? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Motion to cancel the June 2018 hearing. Simon Cruz. Marcel Egley.
Yes?
Marcel Egley, yes. Anton Farmby.
Yes.
Anton Farmby, yes. Frank Huntington.
Yes.
Frank Huntington, yes. Todd Inglis.
Yes.
Todd Inglis, yes. Matthew Lujan.
Yes.
Matthew Lujan, yes. Lynn Morfeld.
Yes.
Lynn Morfeld, yes. Nancy Murish.
Yes.
Nancy Murish, yes. Eli Owen.
Yes.
Eli Owen, yes. Stanton Perez.
Yes.
Stanton Perez, yes. Roy Ron.
Yes.
Roy Ron, yes. Tim Westfall. Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. Okay, so then the last consideration is, what would be the best month to have it down south? Any thoughts? February, June, or October?
I appreciate the sentiment. Thanks, Roy. But being a Southerner, I think that's fine. The thing that I would just like add to this is that since we're having less meetings less frequently, then for me it just makes it that much easier. So it's not a huge deal from my concern, but I just wanted to acknowledge publicly that I really appreciate the consideration.
Well, and you raise a good point, because this is a volunteer committee, and individuals participate at their own expense. And would we have any loss by switching it now for the individuals that are up north to travel to south? Because I'd hate to lose members.
It's more folks from Northern California, correct? Just a couple from the south.
I think
Actually, I was surprised by the number from the south.
there's 4 of us, so Anton, myself, Roy, and Simon.
And the committee's comprised of 13.
I have no problem coming up north.
We have a vacancy right now. And we
she
have,
was from the south.
yeah,
Sandra was from the
but
south
we
as
have,
well, so
we have a vacancy for the locksmith industry, and obviously we have folks not here today.
Well, can I inquire south of San Diego, south of Los Angeles, south is Bakersfield? Where can I ask specifically where in the south we're talking?
Simon's from Ventura, I'm from San Diego. Roy, are you from
Temecula.
Temecula?
So it almost seems, and not to argue, but it almost seems that it would still be a traveling day for all of you,
Correct.
regardless of where in the south we would be.
Correct.
Well, unless we added a pachanga, but that's a different issue. It's a great place for a meeting. I just brought it up for the conversation and to consider it. I don't mind coming up here at all. I do it frequently anyway, and I need the miles.
Okay.
I'm good
So-
with it, and I have a 1 o'clock flight, so if you don't, can I be excused, please?
We're about ready to adjourn.
Oh, great.
Okay,
Thank you.
so
So
I just want to confirm then, at this point in time, we're going to hold off on any further discussions of changing the venue location.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so that takes us to, actually, we have a couple, I think it should be very quickly. What now? Yes. Well, we do item 8. Sorry, item 9, public comment on items not on the agenda. Seeing none, we do the quick run through of committee members. Now, item 10, committee members' recommendation for future advisory committee meetings. Discussion points, items. Start over here to the left and move to the right.
Nothing, Chief.
None at this time.
I have none, but I do have a comment, echoing the sentiments of the public member, and just quickly, in deference to your need to take the flight. I personally appreciate everything you've done for the Bureau. I know how difficult these times are when you get ready to retire and you reflect on the memories and friends and your accomplishments. You've done a wonderful job here. I mean, it's evidenced by the public member's comments, what I've experienced with you. I wish you the best of luck in your retirement. I hope we have another opportunity to do this more formally, with a cake maybe at our next meeting in October. But thank you for everything, Chief.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
Where's
if
the-
I may, I'm sorry. So would this make it your last meeting, Chief?
Yeah.
This would be your last meeting?
Yes, sir.
Well, you'll be back as an advisory it sounds like you'll be helping the new chief.
There is discussions about that possibility of
Okay.
facilitating transition.
So this
yes.
will officially be your last.
In the official capacity, yes, sir.
Will you be able to make the next one in October? I feel like we should do something.
We shall see. I will let you know.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry,
Okay, I have nothing.
Nothing at this time other than to reiterate appreciation for your hard work.
Thank you.
Nothing at this time except to possibly make a motion requiring the chief to be here. I'll table that for now.
Nothing from me. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nothing for me, but I want to echo the thoughts of the other members of the board and tell you that I'm also a member of the International Association of Regulators, IASR, and without a doubt, California has the finest group of regulators in the nation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing for me at this time. Congratulations on your retirement. And I only hope that the next chief has the same commitment as you did with this advisory committee and the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I didn't see any work come out of that one, so that's a good thing. We'll have to. So we're now on item 11. Mike, do I have a motion to adjourn? Lujan, second. Call the roll.
Motion to adjourn the April 12th Advisory Committee meeting. Simon Cruz, Marcel Egley, Anton Farnby.
yes.
Anton Farnby, yes. Frank Huntington.
Yes.
Frank Huntington, yes. Todd Inglis.
Yes.
Todd Inglis, yes. Matthew Lujan.
Yes.
Matthew Lujan, yes. Lynn Morfeld.
Yes.
Lynn Morfeld, yes. Nancy Murish.
Yes.
Nancy Murish, yes. Eli Owen.
Yes.
Eli Owen, yes. Stanton Perez.
Yes.
Stanton Perez, yes. Roy Ron.
Yes.
Roy Ron, yes. Tim Westfall. Motion passes 9-0.
For the record, the meeting adjourned at 12:18.